Because the walnut loop sculpture I made a while back seemed to be a very popular item at open studios, decided I was going to try to make more. I have a few large walnut slabs left, so I decided I was going to make loops out of this whole slab. So I cut it up into pieces, and then I planed one side of the pieces flat enough to glue a waste block on the back. Then I made a circle template which would represent the profile of my ring. So I made 2 concentric rings from 5 of the pieces, and then I had 2 smaller rings left over. So once I turned most of it, I sanded and then parted it from the lathe. I made 12 rings in total. I bought some cold jaws specifically just to do the inside edge. It turned out pretty nice. Once I decided what I was going to do, I cut each one in half. At this point I decided I was going to make 3 sculptures, one with 3 rings, one with 4, and one with 5. So I separated them out, started gluing them up. I would just hold them together for a few minutes until the glue set up enough so that I could set them down and let them air dry for 30 minutes. And it didn't always work, but eventually I made it work. Then I would file and sand the joints, continually moving on to one sculpture while the glue dried on another. I didn't make a plan for any of this, I was just making it up as I went along, as usual. The final glue up was the most difficult because I had to hold 3 joints at the same time, which was near impossible. This sculpture with 3 loops went okay after a few tries. So I finished, filed, and sanded it. Turned out okay. Continued on the other 2. Again, I'm just eyeballing it, kind of comparing it to the other pieces. It's at this point I realized I glued these 2 pieces together wrong. I stupidly tried to pull them apart, thinking they would break at the joint, but they didn't. They broke at a crack in the wood. No problem, I'll just glue it back together. So I'm just continuing to glue joints. Once the glue dried on the cracked piece, I just cut them apart and then glued them back together. Again, I'm just going by eye and feel here, comparing them to make sure I had them glued in the right place. This final glue up wasn't too bad. Turned out alright, except for a little gap in the joints. So I filled that gap with CA glue. Something happened to that joint where it wasn't in the right spot, so I had to cut it apart again and glue it back up. For this final glue up, I sort of fine-tuned the joints so I could minimize the gaps. Just holding it by hand for a few minutes. I decided I was going to make bases out of some scraps of walnut I had lying around. I thought they were pretty interesting shapes. This one I just sanded the faces and left it square with the bark on it. This one I turned into a circle. Mostly a circle, that is. So I sanded it and then shaped it with the rotary tool and hand sanded it. I filled more joints with CA glue. While that dried, I went back to making bases. This one I shaped with the angle grinder. Finished sanding that one. Hand sanded the base. Some really nice figure in that. So I had a 3/8 inch dowel that I was planning to use to mount them to the bases. The first one I drilled, I accidentally went all the way through by mistake. Oops. So I just used some glue and sawdust to make a paste to fill the hole. It worked okay. The second one I drilled, I made a pilot hole first, which worked way better. The third one went perfectly. So I sanded off my patch and it turned out pretty good. Finally, I finished them with spray lacquer. I think they turned out pretty cool.